The glass doors of Grayson's Market hissed open with a tired sigh. A man in a plain gray t-shirt and dark cap stepped inside, his stride steady, unhurried. To everyone else, he looked like just another customer, but his eyes, sharp, deliberate, scanned the room like an audit in motion. And then he heard it, a muffled sob, not the careless whimper of a child, but the choked cry of someone forced to swallow humiliation in public. At the checkout counter, a young janitor in uniform clutched a ragged mop handle with one hand and pressed the other against her face. Her yellow glove glistened where it met her tears. A bucket half filled with cloudy water sat beside her cart, untouched. She wasn't cleaning. She was trying not to collapse. The man stopped mid-step. The store's bright lights reflected off his calm face, but his jaw locked. Something inside him recognized this scene, not the spilled water, not the idle mop, but the raw sound of dignity breaking. He had heard it before, in offices, in lobbies, in lounges where power was measured by appearance. And out loud, he asked a question that cut through the aisles like a blade. Why is she crying? The question froze the air. Shoppers glanced up. A cashier shifted uneasily behind the register, and the janitor, her shoulders trembling, tried to shake her head as if to erase her own pain. But the red around her eyes betrayed her. The man's voice wasn't raised, yet it carried weight. Weight enough to make the moment cinematic, unforgettable. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. He didn't move closer yet. Instead, he stood there, silent, measuring the silence that followed his question. The janitor's eyes darted toward the office door at the far end of the market. Her lips parted as if to speak, then sealed again under the pressure of fear. That was enough, because sometimes tears tell the whole story before a single word is spoken. And Marcus Thompson, the undercover black CEO of this very market, already knew the truth. If a worker was crying in the open, something was rotting behind the scene, and he was about to expose it. The room didn't know his name yet, didn't know he owned the lights overhead, the shelves stacked high, the payroll that fed every hand in the building. To them, he was just another man in jeans, asking an inconvenient question. But in less than 12 minutes, this question would dismantle the illusion of power inside Grayson's Market, and the tears of a janitor would turn into the testimony that toppled her manager. Marcus didn't rush forward. He let the silence sit, heavy as stone, while the janitor wiped her face and stared at the floor. To anyone watching, he was just a man in casual clothes. Gray t-shirt, worn jeans, baseball cap pulled low. Not the image of power, and that was intentional, because Marcus Thompson wasn't here to look powerful. He was here to listen. For weeks, reports had trickled in anonymous complaints, turnover numbers that didn't add up, whispers about mistreatment at this very store. He'd read them all in the comfort of a glass-walled office on the top floor of corporate headquarters. But numbers were sterile. Reports were easy to bury. Tears weren't. So he came alone. No assistant, no suit, no entourage. Just a man blending into the crowd of shoppers, testing the culture of the company that bore his family name. From the moment he stepped through the glass doors, he felt the weight of eyes on him, not because anyone recognized him, but because of the way he looked. A black man in jeans, walking without the armor of status. It wasn't the first time he'd chosen this disguise. It was the same playbook he'd used years ago when checking the first store his company ever acquired. Back then, a cashier refused to let him buy a pair of shoes without extra ID. He was the owner even then. He never forgot the sting. He never forgot the smile of the manager who backed her up, laughing like it was policy. That moment didn't crush him. It built him. It taught him that the systems he built would be judged not by their products, but by how they treated the most invisible person in the room. And right now, the most invisible person was standing 3 feet away, fighting back sobs in a pair of rubber gloves. Marcus shifted his weight, scanning the aisles. A young college kid by the snack display lifted his phone slightly, as if debating whether to record. An elderly man near the dairy section shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath. The tension was no longer private, it was public. Marcus' voice cut again, steady, low. You don't cry like that unless somebody made you. Ugh. The janitor's lips parted. Her voice caught in her throat. Before she could answer, a sharp sound sliced through the store, the heavy stomp of dress shoes against tile. The manager was coming. Tall, stiff shoulders, a clipboard in hand like a weapon, his eyes locked on the janitor, not Marcus. What is this? he barked. Slacking off again? Making a scene in front of customers? The janitor shrank back, her mop trembling in her hand. Marcus stayed still, blending into the backdrop. To the manager, he was just another shopper, harmless. Exactly what Marcus wanted. Because the moment you show up as CEO, people pretend. But when you show up as nobody, that's when you find the truth. The manager's voice hit the janitor like a hammer. You think we pay you to cry? You're holding up the front of the store. Customers don't need to see your pity party. His clipboard snapped shut with a clap. The sound made two shoppers flinch. The janitor's voice came out in fragments. I just needed a moment. My mom, she's in the hospital. I was trying. Save it. He cut her off, sharp, dismissive. You want sympathy? Go find a therapist. Here, you do what you're told. Marcus stayed still, arms folded loosely, eyes locked. The disguise was working. He was invisible. The manager hadn't even looked at him. But the young college kid by the snack display had lifted his phone higher, thumb hovering over record. A moral crossroads flickered across his face. Record? Or stay quiet? The manager noticed the movement. His head snapped up. Put that phone down. This isn't a circus. Unless you want to be escorted out too. The kid's hand shook, then lowered. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, shame burning across his cheeks. The janitor's breathing quickened. She tried again. Please, I just asked for 5 minutes. Her words were drowned out by his bark. You're lucky we don't dock your pay every time you disappear. If I had my way, you'd be gone already. And then, like fuel to the fire, another voice joined in. From behind the register, a cashier, arms crossed, smirk carved across her face, spoke just loud enough. Maybe she's stealing time. Wouldn't be the first. The janitor's shoulders caved inward. The tears came harder now. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak. Not yet. Because he knew every second he waited, the truth revealed itself more clearly. The elderly man near the dairy section shook his head again. Disgraceful, he muttered. His wife tugged his arm, whispering, Don't get involved. But the air was already charged, alive with something bigger than embarrassment. This wasn't a single scolding. It was an execution of dignity, staged in public, delivered with glee. The manager leaned in, towering over the janitor, his voice cold as steel. You don't belong here. If it were up to me, you'd be out of this store today. Ugh. And for the first time, Marcus shifted. A single step forward, not enough to reveal, just enough to mark the moment. Because the line had been crossed, and the clock on this manager's career had already started ticking down. Marcus didn't rush into the conflict. He stood at the end of the aisle, one hand resting lightly on a display shelf, body calm, eyes steady. The manager's anger was a storm. The janitor's sobs were its rain. But Marcus? He was the ground unmoving, waiting, letting the water reveal every crack in the structure. The manager mistook his silence for absence. He turned fully on the janitor now, clipboard pressed against his chest like a badge of authority. You think tears make me soft? They don't. They make me doubt why we hired you at all. The janitor's voice barely rose above a whisper. I never stopped working. I just wanted to call my mom. Her words trembled, fragile, but honest. Marcus inhaled slowly, controlled. He wanted to speak, wanted to cut through the cruelty with truth, but restraint was power. Every unjust word, every smirk from the cashier, every nervous glance from the customers, it was all evidence. Evidence he didn't have to gather. It was gathering itself. He remembered another day years ago when he was just starting out. At 25, walking into a bank in Atlanta wearing his best suit, proud of the down payment he'd scraped together. The loan officer looked at him, looked at his skin, and called him high risk. That sting, that humiliation it taught him, silence wasn't weakness. Silence was memory, and memory became strategy. So now, as the janitor broke in front of a crowd, Marcus held his ground. His silence wasn't surrender, it was calculation. The college kid by the snacks shuffled his feet, guilt heavy on his shoulders. He wanted to speak, but fear closed his throat. The elderly man still muttered disapproval, but never louder than his wife's warnings. Around them, shoppers looked down at their carts, pretending to be busy, pretending not to witness. It was the perfect stage, cruelty on one side, cowardice on the other, and Marcus, in the middle, steady as a locked vault. The manager sneered, You're lucky I don't call security right now. Maybe I should. Get you out before you embarrass us in front of more people. Marcus finally moved one small nod, as if he had just marked the words for record. He didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't intervene, Because power doesn't need to announce itself. It waits. It listens. And when the time comes, it speaks once and everything changes. For now, Marcus kept his silence. But inside, the decision was already made. This store's leadership had failed its test. And the moment he opened his mouth, their careers would collapse like glass struck by a hammer. The room wasn't quiet anymore. Silence had fractured into whispers, sharp, quick, like glass breaking in the aisles. Near the refrigerated drinks, a young college kid shifted his weight again, thumb brushing against the edge of his phone. His chest rose and fell in short bursts. He wanted to film. The instinct of his generation. Record, post, let the world decide. He raised the phone, camera lens catching the fluorescent glare above. But before he hit record, Marcus's eyes met his. Calm, firm. A look that said, "Not yet." Words before footage. Dignity before clicks. The kid froze, lowered the phone slightly. He hadn't spoken a word, but his hesitation was loud enough to echo. Across the store, an elderly man leaned on his cane, head shaking in disapproval. His voice carried just enough to be heard. "This isn't management. This is bullying." His wife tugged his sleeve, whispering, "Leave it, Harold. Don't get involved." But the words had already escaped into the air. A small stone dropped into the pool of silence. The cashier by the register let out a sharp laugh, masking her nerves. "Bullying? Please. We're protecting the store. People like her are the reason we get complaints." Gasps. Soft, but unmistakable. A mother with 2 children at her side pressed them closer, frowning at the venom in that sentence. The janitor's shoulders curled in tighter. She was no longer crying softly. Her sobs filled the space between the aisles, raw and undeniable. And yet, for every cruel word, another set of eyes turned. A man in a business suit near the lottery counter. A young woman scrolling her phone, now frozen mid-swipe. An employee stacking cereal boxes, jaw clenched as if he'd heard too much, seen too much, for too long. The stage had widened. This wasn't just between the manager and the janitor anymore. It was between power abused and dignity exposed. And still, Marcus stayed silent. Arms folded loosely, head tilted slightly forward, as if observing a case unfold in court. He knew the value of letting others speak first. Let the truth reveal itself. Let the witnesses awaken. The college kid finally slipped the phone back into his pocket, but he spoke quiet, hesitant, almost to himself. This doesn't feel right." The manager snapped his head around. "What was that?" The kid froze, eyes wide. "Nothing, sir." But it was already too late. The words were in the air, and the room had heard them. For the first time, the balance shifted. The janitor wasn't standing alone anymore. The witnesses were beginning to find their voices. Marcus exhaled slowly, his silence still intact. Because sometimes, the most powerful move isn't to speak first, it's to let the world condemn itself. The manager's jaw tightened. His face flushed a dangerous red. He turned away from the timid student, locking his eyes back on the janitor as if doubling down could erase the crack in his authority. "You see what you've done?" he spat. "Now you've got customers questioning my leadership. You're toxic. You don't deserve this job." The janitor tried to steady her breath, but her voice cracked through the tears. "I've worked every night this week. I came in on my day off. All I asked for was a few minutes my mother's on a hospital bed." The words trembled, but they were the kind that carried truth. The cashier scoffed loudly, arms crossed. "Hospital bed? Right. Next she'll say she's paying medical bills with our cleaning supplies." A couple near the frozen foods section exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "That's too far." The elderly man with the cane raised his voice again, firmer this time. "She doesn't deserve this. None of us deserve to watch it either." The manager snapped. "Enough." His voice cracked like a whip across the store. "Sir, stay out of this. And as for you," he turned back to the janitor, venom dripping from every word. "You're finished. Don't even bother clocking out. Hand over your badge, now." The janitor froze, lips trembling, her hands instinctively reaching for the small plastic card clipped to her shirt. Her entire livelihood, her entire paycheck, dangling in that badge. Marcus felt his pulse harden. His eyes narrowed, but his body remained still. This was it, the escalation he had been waiting for. The cruelty wasn't casual anymore. It was official, documented, spoken in front of witnesses. And then came the shove. The manager yanked the mop from her grip and hurled it against the cart. The clatter rang out through the aisles, sharp and humiliating. "You don't belong here," he shouted. The janitor flinched as if the words themselves had weight. Gasps erupted. A mother covered her child's ears. The young worker stacking cereal finally dropped his box and stepped forward, fists clenched. "This isn't right," he said, voice shaking but loud. The cashier snapped back instantly. "Stay in your lane. You want to end up jobless like her?" The cereal clerk hesitated, lips pressed thin, but he didn't retreat. His eyes burned with the same truth the others had begun to feel. The tension was unbearable now. The store felt less like a supermarket and more like a courtroom, the fluorescent lights suddenly harsh, exposing every cruelty and unforgiving detail. And Marcus, still anonymous, still calm, took another breath. The evidence was overflowing. The witnesses were alive. The abuse had peaked. The time for silence was ending. The store fell into a brittle silence, the kind that arrives right before glass shatters. The janitor stood frozen, fingers trembling near the badge clipped to her chest. The manager's face twisted into something darker, no longer just anger, but a performance of dominance. "Give it to me," he demanded, stepping closer. "Your badge. Hand it over, or I'll have security drag you out like a thief." The janitor's lips parted. "Please don't." But the plea only sharpened his cruelty. With one sudden motion, he reached forward, ripped the badge from her shirt, and held it high in the air like a trophy. "Fraud," he sneered, his voice echoing across the aisles. "You never belonged here." The sound of plastic snapping against its clip carried heavier than any shout. It was humiliation turned into theater. A mother gasped. The elderly man with the cane nearly dropped it, his hands shaking. The young cereal clerk muttered under his breath, "That's theft. That's not policy." But the manager wasn't done. He tossed the badge into his clipboard, slammed it shut, and barked to the cashier, "Call security. I want her escorted out immediately." The cashier smirked, lifting the landline receiver. "Security. This is Register 1. We've got a suspected thief. Immediate removal requested." Her words rang with venom, practiced, as though this wasn't the first time. The janitor covered her face with both hands, her sobs breaking into full cries now. She wasn't just crying for herself, she was crying for every humiliation piled on top of this one. And Marcus felt it. Every nerve in his body demanded action. He had seen many forms of bias, but to rip a worker's badge off in public, to brand her a thief in her own workplace, this was beyond cruelty. It was systemic rot made visible. The college kid could no longer hold back. He pulled his phone out again, thumb-tapping record, voice cracking with courage. "Everyone can see this. She didn't steal anything. You just humiliated her." The manager spun toward him, fury uncontained. "You put that phone down or I'll have you removed too." But the kid didn't stop. His lens stayed up, capturing everything. The badge clamped in the clipboard, the janitor's broken frame, the smirk of the cashier dialing security. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. The cruelty had reached its peak. The evidence was undeniable. The witnesses were ready. Marcus took a step forward. The ground beneath this manager was about to collapse. Marcus's footsteps echoed as he finally moved closer. Slow, controlled. Each step landing like a verdict being written. The manager didn't notice him at first, too busy posturing, clutching the stolen badge against his clipboard, barking into the chaos like a conductor of cruelty. "Security will be here in 2 minutes. She'll be out the door before the hour's up." But then Marcus spoke. Not loud, not angry, just steady. "Call them," he said. "Please, make sure they see everything you've done." The words hung in the air, calm but cutting. The manager turned, eyes narrowing at this stranger who dared to interrupt. "And who exactly are you? Another customer? Stay out of this. It's none of your business." Marcus met his glare without flinching. "Everything that happens in this building is my business." The cashier scoffed. "Oh, really? What are you? Some kind of lawyer? You look like you just wandered in off the street." Marcus didn't respond to her. Instead, he pulled out his phone and pressed one button. On the other end, a crisp voice answered immediately. "Mr. Thompson?" Confirming. "Do you want protocol engaged?" The sound froze the cashier mid-sentence. The manager blinked, thrown off by the deference in that unseen voice. "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "Activate internal review. Log this store. Timestamp every word that's been said in the last 10 minutes. The phone crackled once more. "Understood. Recording now. Legal is notified." Ugh. The manager barked out a laugh, desperate to regain footing. "Cute trick. You think some call center's going to scare me?" Marcus tucked the phone back into his pocket. His eyes never wavered. This isn't a trick. It's accountability. The college kid filming lowered his phone slightly, whispering, "Wait, did he say Mr. Thompson?" His brows furrowed, recognition flickering. The janitor, still trembling, looked up through swollen eyes. For the first time, she saw the calm behind Marcus's disguise. It wasn't the calm of a passerby. It was the calm of someone who knew he was untouchable. The manager stepped forward, voice dripping with arrogance. "Look, whoever you are, you've already crossed a line. Customers don't dictate my store. Employees don't dictate my rules. I run this place, not you." Marcus tilted his head slightly. His voice dropped lower. "Is that what you think?" The lights above hummed. The air was tight, every witness holding their breath. Because the man they thought was just another shopper had just triggered something bigger than a confrontation. He had triggered a system designed for moments exactly like this, when dignity was stripped, when power was abused, when justice needed to arrive not in weeks, not in HR memos, but here, in real time. The countdown had begun. The store's hum seemed to dim as Marcus closed the space between himself and the manager. No hurry, no raised voice, just presence. The janitor stood frozen, her eyes darting between the two men, one clutching her badge like stolen property, the other moving with a calm that didn't belong to an ordinary shopper. Marcus stopped just a few feet away. "You keep saying you run this place," he said quietly, "but let me correct you, what you run is a shift, a title printed on a badge, a clipboard with schedules. That's all." The manager sneered, trying to laugh. "And you think you run more? Please, who even are you?" Marcus' gaze didn't falter. "I'm the reason this store exists, the reason you collect a paycheck. The name you've ignored is the name on the lease, the name on the accounts, the name carved into the foundation of this company." The college kid's phone was trembling now, his live stream chat exploding. "Wait, Thompson? As in Thompson Retail Group?" one voice whispered behind the camera. The manager blinked, face paling. "Thompson?" Marcus nodded once. "Marcus Thompson, founder, owner, CEO." The words landed like a hammer. Gasps rippled down the aisles. The elderly man leaned on his cane, whispering, "Good Lord, he owns it." The mother by the freezer clutched her child tighter, murmuring, "That's why he's so calm." The cashier's smirk collapsed into silence. The manager stammered, color draining from his face. No, this is some kind of trick. You don't dress like..." Marcus cut him off, sharp but even. "Like what? Like a man who belongs in his own store? That's the mistake you made. You looked at the clothes, the skin, the silence, and you thought it meant weakness. It doesn't. It means I was giving you rope. And you just used it." The janitor's tears slowed, replaced by something else. Disbelief, then hope. Marcus extended a hand toward her, voice steady. "That badge doesn't belong to him. It belongs to you. Because this store runs on your work, not his cruelty." The manager's grip tightened on the clipboard, but his authority was already gone. Customers were whispering, recording, bearing witness. His world had shrunk to a single aisle where his arrogance had no cover left. Marcus's final words in that moment were quiet, but they struck harder than any shout. "You didn't just humiliate an employee. You humiliated yourself in front of the man who built the ground you're standing on." The store was silent. Silent, except for the quiet gasp of the crowd realizing they had just seen the truth unmasked. And the man with the clipboard, the one who thought he ran everything, was about to discover he had already lost it all. The silence broke in a wave of gasps, whispers, and hurried footsteps as the truth settled over the store. The manager staggered back half a step, clipboard sagging in his grip. His eyes darted to the cashier as if begging for confirmation that this wasn't real. But her face told a different story. Pale, lips pressed tight, hands trembling on the phone receiver. She dropped it back into its cradle with a hollow click. The janitor clutched her chest, her breath shaky, but now her tears weren't only grief. They were release. The storm had shifted. The college kid filming could barely keep his camera steady. "He's the CEO," he whispered into his mic, his live stream already filling with comments. "No way. This is insane. They messed with the owner himself." Shoppers who had been frozen by fear began murmuring louder. "He owns this place? All that cruelty, and he watched it all happen? God, I can't believe we just saw this live." The elderly man with the cane raised his voice, steady and fierce now. "You see? This is what happens when arrogance meets truth. I told you, Harold was right." His wife no longer silenced him. She stood beside him, nodding firmly. The serial clerk, who had tried to defend the janitor before, looked at Marcus with wide eyes. His fists, once clenched with frustration, now loosened in relief. For the first time, he saw authority standing where it belonged. And the cashier, her earlier smirk gone, stepped back from the counter as though the ground beneath her had turned unstable. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't know. I didn't mean—" Marcus's eyes cut to her, calm but unyielding. She stopped mid-sentence, swallowed hard, and looked down at her shoes. The manager's voice finally broke through, thin and cracked. This is some kind of setup. You came here dressed like that, looking like that, just to—" Marcus raised a hand, silencing him without a word. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of ownership. The entire store seemed to hold its breath. The witnesses weren't silent anymore. Phones were raised. Customers were speaking openly. The performance of authority the manager had clung to was gone, dissolved in the light of a truth too large to hide. Even the janitor, still trembling, straightened a little. She wiped her face with the back of her glove and looked at Marcus with something close to awe. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. And for the first time, the manager and his allies were. The store had turned. The crowd wasn't on their side anymore. Every cruel word they had spoken was now evidence. Every sneer recorded, every abuse exposed. They were no longer managers or cashiers. They were defendants in the court of public witness. And their judge had just revealed himself. Marcus let the silence linger until it pressed like weight on every chest in the room. Then, with the calm authority of a man used to making decisions that ripple through thousands of lives, he spoke. "Manager, cashier, effective immediately, your employment with this company is terminated." The words were simple, quiet, but they cracked like thunder. The cashier's knees buckled slightly. You can't just—" Marcus's gaze cut across her like a blade. "Your badge is already deactivated. Try the register." She swallowed hard, glanced at the screen, and tapped her code. Nothing. A red bar flashed across the monitor. Access denied. Her face drained of color. Marcus shifted his eyes to the manager. "Hand me her badge. Then yours." The manager clutched the clipboard tighter, defiance flickering, but it was hollow. He pressed his badge to the point-of-sale scanner, as if daring fate to prove him wrong. The machine beeped red. A low buzz followed, signaling lockout. His throat tightened. This can't—" "It is," Marcus said, steady, "because I built a system that doesn't wait for paperwork. Abuse doesn't get 30 days. It ends now." The janitor's sobs had stilled. Her eyes widened as she watched authority fold in on itself. The men and women who had tried to strip her dignity stripped of their own in seconds. The college kids' live stream chat went wild. He fired them on the spot, their badges locked. "This is unreal." The elderly man with the cane gave a satisfied nod. "Justice," he muttered, his voice carrying like a gavel strike. Marcus turned slightly, addressing the crowd without raising his voice. "No employee is beneath respect. No customer is above accountability. And no manager will survive 1 hour in my company if they humiliate the people who keep it alive." His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He tapped it on, and his assistant's voice flowed through the speaker. "Mr. Thompson, confirmation. Both accounts disabled. Security logs updated. Legal notified. Do you want the termination letters processed for immediate delivery?" "Yes," Marcus said. "And note, this incident is logged for corporate review. Permanent records." The manager's clipboard slipped from his hand and clattered to the tile. His face, once flushed with power, now pale with disbelief. The cashier stared at the dead screen in front of her, the red denial flashing again and again. It was over, and it had taken less than 12 minutes. The store was still. No more shouting, no more cruelty, just the sharp, undeniable sound of justice having spoken. The manager stood frozen, stripped of his badge, his clipboard abandoned at his feet. The cashier stared at her useless terminal, the red denial flashing like a scarlet letter. Their authority had evaporated in public, dissolved under the gaze of witnesses who would never forget what they'd seen. Marcus turned toward the janitor. She was still trembling, gloves damp with tears, but her posture had changed. Her head was no longer bowed. Her eyes, red and tired, lifted to meet his. He extended her badge back to her, the same piece of plastic that had been torn away minutes earlier. But now it was more than a badge. It was proof. Proof that she belonged, that her work mattered, that dignity could not be snatched away by arrogance. "This belongs to you," Marcus said softly. Her hand shook as she took it back. Thank you. You thought you were invisible, Marcus finished for her, his voice steady, almost a whisper. But not here, not in my company. No one should cry for dignity inside these walls. A hush settled over the crowd. Customers who had been strangers only minutes ago now stood united in their silence, every one of them marked by what they'd witnessed. Phones were still raised, recording not just the cruelty but the correction, the proof that silence, when wielded by the right hands, was never weakness. Marcus faced the room, his voice carrying across the aisles. Respect is not optional here. It is the foundation. Without it, there is no store, no company, no empire. And let this moment stand as proof. When respect is denied, justice will not wait. The elderly man with the cane gave a firm nod, his wife finally letting go of his arm. The college kid whispered into his phone, "He said it. That's the quote." The cereal clerk stood taller, chest lifted as if he'd just seen hope planted where despair had grown. Marcus turned once more to the janitor. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You are the reason this store breathes. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Then he looked at the former manager, pale and shaking. "You wanted to make an example of her. Instead, you became the example." His words landed like a final gavel. And with that, Marcus walked toward the glass doors, leaving silence and revelation in his wake. No victory lap, no theatrics, just truth, carved clean into the memory of everyone present. Because power doesn't need to roar. It only needs to stand, steady, and speak once. And in that store, on that day, justice had spoken.